Welcome to Inside Athletic Training, a podcast from the Professional Baseball Athletic Trainer Society and the ultimate destination for athletic training professionals, students, and educators looking to learn more about sports medicine and athletic training. In each episode, we'll dive headfirst into conversations with experts in the field, bringing you insights, stories, and cutting-edge information about athletic training and sports medicine. This week on Inside Athletic Training, we welcome in Sean McQueeney, the head athletic trainer for the Cincinnati Reds. Enjoy the show. All right, Sean, welcome to Inside Athletic Training. Very happy to have you on for episode 58 of the show. Look forward to speaking with you today about all things athletic training and your career. For a little background information for the listeners, you're currently in your third season as head athletic trainer with the Cincinnati Reds organization. A huge role with the club, a lot to discuss, a lot to talk about, and your career going forward today. But first, to get started, let's share a little bit of background information with the listeners. Let's hear where you're from. Were you into any sports growing up, and how did you find your passion for athletic training?
Perfect. So that's always a funny question to start. I was a military brat, so I was born in Port Angeles, Washington, which is just across the water here from Seattle, where we're currently at. And my dad was in the Coast Guard, so 12 days later we moved, and pretty much my whole upbringing was moving all over the country. So when people ask where am I from, I like to say I was born in Washington State, but never really lived there.
Sure.
I was able to graduate high school eventually in New Jersey and did some college there, went to Louisiana State, also Greensboro, North Carolina, and then I lived in Phoenix for 16 years. So I like to tell people that's the longest I've lived somewhere. And that's probably the best. When people ask, where am I from? That's probably the best answer.
Sure.
Sports growing up, I was a baseball nut. I absolutely loved baseball. I couldn't get enough of it. I read just about any book I could find on autobiographies or biographies on players and just the whole history of the sport. I loved all of it. I played some soccer in high school, and also a bunch of volleyball. And that's kind of what I spent my time doing when I was growing up. Yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of the background of where I'm from.
Yeah. And was there any point in time in your high school days or kind of before you knew what you wanted to do that you were exposed to athletic training, or was that something that kind of came later in life for you?
I can remember my first exposure was in high school. I tried to run winter track in New Jersey just to keep myself in shape for baseball season. Mm-hmm. And I developed a foot injury, and we had an athletic trainer there at the school that just started, and she was able to help me out and get me feeling better and get moving. And that's kind of my first introduction to athletic training. But coming out of high school, all I wanted to do was be a professional baseball player. So I geared my schooling. I went to Louisiana State University at the time. They won 4 national championships, and I figured, I'm going to be a professional ball player, I should go to the best baseball school in the nation. And I was able to go there, and I sat down with Skip Bertman, he was a great coach there for many, many years. And I sat down with him and told him what I wanted to do. And he pretty much gave me a dose of reality and said, you know what, I got guys that turned down 4-year rides to come here to walk on. And I wasn't even scouted for anything. I definitely didn't have the talent. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of what got me going in that direction. And I chased down baseball. I went to a couple different colleges to try to play baseball and did some professional tryouts, and had the reality sink in that I just didn't have the talent to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's what kind of led me into athletic training, is that was kind of always in the background of being around athletes and working with athletes. And having been an athlete myself, I really liked the environment. And so I started taking some classes in athletic training, and it wasn't until I had fully realized I wasn't going to be a professional ball player that I really turned my focus to athletic training and physical therapy, for that matter, with the full intention of working in baseball.
Yeah, seemingly the dream ends for you and me and everybody at some point, unless you're in the top percent of talented individuals. So I can definitely relate to that. And you mentioned the classes you took, and I want to start a little bit by talking about your education. You have a bachelor's degree in science, a master's in physical therapy, and also a doctorate in physical therapy as well. Very accomplished on the educational front. Can you talk about your thoughts on education and athletic training and physical therapy, and also what led you to kind of pursuing, both your master's and doctorate and getting degrees at the highest level?
Definitely. That was kind of, as I was saying, getting down to the end of the road of my my baseball career as a player. And there was Stockton University was very near to where my parents lived. And they had a master's in physical therapy program. And I thought that might be a pretty good career to go down because I felt like it tied very closely to athletic training. There's a lot of similarities, a lot of overlap of both professions. And I thought that would be a great opportunity for me to get into baseball with all that knowledge. And at the time, you could still do the internship route for athletic training, which didn't require a degree in athletic training. You could go do the hours, take the appropriate classes, and then go sit for the exam. And so I did all of that at the same time. A lot of the physical therapy classes allowed for the requirements of the athletic training certification. And I got my athletic training certification. And the very next year, I graduated with my master's in physical therapy. And that was 2004 when I graduated with that. And I think it was 2006 or 7, Stockton offered a transitional doctorate for people that had already graduated with a professional physical therapy degree. And my thought process was, it's only 4 classes online. I didn't want to wait 10, 15 years down the road when those requirements might expand and end up being more classes and more time. And so 2009, I completed all of the degree work and received my transitional doctorate. So I felt for the time to put forward for that was very simple, very easy to get a doctorate. And I just felt like it was provided me a better resume, a better background, a better understanding that would push me further in my career path.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's great foresight by you. Obviously, things are changing constantly in the athletic training and physical therapy education space where now, master's degrees are required and things have really progressed. So awesome to hear that you kind of had a vision for that in the early days. During those days when you were at college, or even, in the minor leagues, we'll touch on in a bit here. A lot of our guests have mentioned there's someone who showed them the way, someone who taught them how athletic training works, someone who gave them some insight. Did you have any role models or mentors who you really looked up to as you were coming up through your educational experience?
Definitely. I had kind of where it really kicked off is I did a lot of my internship hours or my observation hours prior to physical therapy school with PT in New Jersey, Rick Delegata. He was definitely the very first introduction to a physical therapy clinic. And he had a number of connections that allowed me to really pepper questions about what direction and where to go. That was kind of the first for physical therapy. For athletic training, the athletic trainer at Stockton University was John Heck, and he really started the path for me to be able to get my athletic training certification. And then he actually created a grad assistantship for me for my last semester there at Stockton. And I was able to work as an athletic trainer while I was doing my PT degree and continue to develop my experience in the athletic training world. I like to tell all of our interns for the PBATS internship program that I completed the internship in 2004 with the Reds. So when I got this job 3 years ago, it was almost like a homecoming. There was a lot of people that were here that are still here that were there in 2004 when I was an intern. But the guys that were in that training room were Mark Mann, who's now retired from baseball, Nick Kenny, who is now with the Kansas City Royals. He's been a great mentor to me my whole career. And I actually met Lonnie Soloff there in Cincinnati the year before, prior to doing the internship in 2004. And he's been with the Cleveland Guardians for years now. So those guys have been kind of the foundation and the starting point for my career, and have been really instrumental in me developing myself and going down this path.
And I think anyone that knows Nick Kenny, who's the current PBATS president, and Lonnie Soloff, who is on the PBATS executive board as well, knows that they're two amazing guys to learn from, very organized, very professional, and really push everybody around them to be better. So I could imagine how impactful and helpful it was to be around both Nick and Lonnie and the other guys you mentioned. Well, Sean, I want to hear more about, the breakthrough getting into baseball. A lot of our listeners may be doing their first internship, or applying for PBATS internships, or applying for internships across a number of different sports. You're in your third year now as the Reds head athletic trainer, but obviously, like many in your position, you spent a ton of time in different jobs, different roles in baseball. You spent time in winter ball, also nearly 7 years with the Mariners organization, and also some years with the Royals as well. I want to hear more from you about, how did you get your start in baseball? What did it take to break through? And just how those times in the minor leagues and coming up really shaped you as an athletic training professional.
Definitely. As I said, where it started was that PBATS internship. And I did that right after PT school. I had applied in the fall of 2003. And the summer of 2003, I was able to meet Nick Kenny and Lonnie Soloff and Mark Mann in Cincinnati. And they encouraged me to apply for the internship, and I applied in the fall. And that January, I was able to go to the PBATS seminar that Dr. Yoakum used to lead. It was in Baltimore that year. And I remember meeting Nick Kenny again, and I was almost put off because he was so nice. And I tell people this all the time, that I felt like I was being scammed, because he was just so welcoming and like he was really interested in my personal development and me being part of professional baseball. And I was just super leery. I don't know why, but just super leery of him being welcoming and open and wanting me to do this internship with them. And so through the spring, I had many conversations with him. At the time, Lonnie had moved to Cleveland, and he also offered me an internship. And I eventually chose to go to Cincinnati. Nick had helped me set up my last clinical rotation for physical therapy school at Beacon Orthopedics, which is Dr. Tim Kremchek's clinic. And I like to call it his castle there. He had at the time his surgery suite, MRI, they had physical therapy. They had a full-on baseball training center there. And it was just the epitome of what I was looking for as a sports professional. Everything was right there that they could do. And so I did my last clinical rotation there in Cincinnati from May to July. And then the second half of the season, I was down in the training room at the stadium. And that's really where that kicked off everything for me, is getting that internship and being in that training room day in and day out and seeing how professional baseball at the highest level ran. And I think what I really got out of being there was not any skills. It wasn't any knowledge as far as book knowledge, but it was the conversations with Nick about how do I handle myself in a professional baseball setting with high level athletes? How do you respect their space? How do you provide them the care that they need, but not encroach on who they are as individuals and professional baseball players that may have been doing this for many, many years. And it was just a great environment to learn that. And we had in that clubhouse was Ken Griffey Jr. and Barry Larkin and Adam Dunn. And so me coming in there was like, my eyes were as big as pie plates to see these guys right there. And not even just me handing them a towel, but we actually had conversations and could talk through things. And it was just such an eye-opening experience for me to see that these elite baseball players, Hall of Famers, were just people. And that's all that they were doing there, was just living their lives and doing the best that they can. Just a unbelievable experience. So the PBATS internship for me was just the best that I could ever do. And then leading into my actual career, I think having that on my resume gave me a leg up on any jobs that I applied for. So the completion of that internship, I sent out my resume to every professional team. Mark Mann was able to get me a list of all the names of the head trainers and everybody that I needed to send those out to. And luckily I was able to land the rehab coordinator job right out of that internship. Coming right out of school, I feel like that's a relatively uncommon thing to do, especially at that time, to come right out of school and kind of be overseeing a rehab department for a professional baseball team.
Yeah, that's definitely a quick transition, one that's very unique to your path compared to a lot of our guests who, have taken a more traditional path. And also want to touch on that great point you mentioned about Nick Kenny and his guidance. A lot of our guests on here have talked about how important the actual feel for the training room is, and using that word feel, it's not a easily defined term, but having a feel for what goes on in the training room, how to communicate with players who, like you said, are just people. I think a lot of our members and our guests here have mentioned how important that is, and how you really need someone in your corner as a mentor to show you the ropes about how the life in the training room actually works. Well, Sean, I want to next touch on, a bit about your time after that internship. So I know you spent time with the Mariners and the Royals. Talk about your experience in the minor leagues and just how important that is for a young professional, especially like yourself, who jumped in so early to a big role. How kind of being able to make mistakes at the lower level of the minor leagues is truly impactful and helpful throughout your career.
So I think the first thing is just realizing that what I saw in my internship of being at that highest level is really elite. Like, it's not an opportunity that everybody gets to do. And for the most part, many people that are working in baseball don't ever get that opportunity. So you really have to love working in the sport, want to work in professional baseball, and take jobs in the minor leagues, because it's not as glamorous as what it appears to be at the major league level. And so it really tests your desire to want to work with professional baseball players to be in the minor leagues, because it's not easy. There's definitely long hours. I was in Arizona, and so the summers down there are ungodly hot, and we still have to go outside and train, and we still have our players that have to get better, and we continue to battle the elements. And doing that for 7 years really has you test your mettle to see if that is what you want to do with your life. So I think it makes getting up to this level that much sweeter, because you remember all those times that you struggled, and you remember all of the hard days and the days you didn't want to go outside and, play catch in 115 degree heat.
Yeah.
And it makes that so much sweeter to be up here. But it also helped develop me, because at the time I was the only physical therapist in the minor leagues for the Mariners. And coming right out of school and not having, worked, say, in a clinic job, or have a lot of the experience of seeing a lot of people, rehabs and rehabbing players, I had to learn a lot on the fly. And then I think back to the first couple of years of how I would do rehabs and how I would structure out programs, and see how that evolved and changed as I would work with a player and see what didn't work for him, or not get a guy healthy and question, what do I think's going on here? And really testing out personally what it is that I think is needing to happen, and what are the things that are necessary for this guy to get healthy and to get better. And I think for me, that was a huge part of my development, because it truly was a sink or swim. I didn't really have a mentor that was right there with me that would oversee my processes or my programming or how I would do things, I really had to learn it on the fly and try to tease out why a guy wasn't getting better or what's making this guy get better and that guy not get better. Mm-hmm. And I feel like as I continued in there, it really helped me get better as a clinician as far as how I'm working with guys, my techniques, my treatment paths, but also how do I interact with that player so that he has trust in me that the things I'm telling him are actually going to get him healthy and get him better. And I think that's a huge, huge piece of just being a medical professional, let alone being in professional baseball. This is these guys' livelihood. So they want to be certain that you know what you're doing to get them on the right path. And if you don't have that respect, if you don't have that belief from the player that you know what you're talking about, then you're sunk.
Yeah, that's a great way to explain it. I know the development in the minor leagues is so impactful for so many, especially those who kind of came up when staffs were much smaller and they were, like you said, kind of out on an island to make decisions for themselves and really just learn trial, by error and make things happen. So cool to hear you echo those same statements as a lot of our guests here. Well, Sean, after your time with the Mariners, Royals, you moved on to working at a number of private clinics as a physical therapist. Want to hear more from you about the thought process to get out of baseball for a bit and getting back into working as a physical therapist at various clinics.
Yeah, definitely. My 2013 was my last year in professional baseball. I had been with Kansas City for 2 years and had the great opportunity to work with Nick Kenny at that time. He was the head trainer of the Royals, and I was the rehab coordinator, and it was really a great move for me because he is somebody that I had leaned on through the beginning of my career to be able to ask questions and talk through things. And it was a great opportunity to be there in Kansas City. However, I had realized that I was starting to get burnt out. And early in my career, I didn't do a really good job of separating out having a job and having a life that is separate. I just constantly was thinking about work, doing work, always there. If work was good, my life was good. If work was bad, my life was bad. Excuse me. And so it was kind of a good thing that I was able to leave and step away from baseball at the time, because it really allowed me to realize that I need to have a life separate from the job. Mm-hmm. That the jobs come and go. It's great to do what you love, but you still need to have that separation and that time for yourself so that you're not so caught up in just one thing through your life. So I had the intention of building a clinic empire where I could eventually own a number of clinics and not have to do treatments and be more of the manager and overseer. And I actually bought into a clinic right after I got out of baseball. And about 8 months later, I sold out. I like to look back now and realize that I didn't do my due diligence to really inspect the clinic that I was buying into and how things are run and how much freedom to change things and move things as I saw fit to do. And so that kind of fell through. And then I was able to get a job working in corporate wellness. There's a company called Premise Health that goes into large corporations and sets up physical therapy clinics in their office building for their employees. So I did that for a period of time and wanted to have some more freedom of time for myself. And so after that, I got into traveling physical therapy, which I absolutely loved, to work a contract for 3 to 6 months and then go find another one or take some downtime. And in there, I was able to do 3 months in Europe with my girlfriend. And we pretty much lived out of a car and camped everywhere and got to see all sorts of things. But I'm realizing that that's something that I didn't see as available working in baseball with our hours. And so it really was a good time period there to explore all of those things that I didn't feel I had available to me while I was working in baseball, and realized that these are the things I enjoy in life, to travel and to see different things and experience things outside of just work. And I eventually, as you mentioned, I did go to China. That was something that came up after traveling through Europe. I was still on a kick of, let's go see the world. And the Chinese Olympic teams were looking for professionals, medical professionals from all over the world that could come in and provide a different viewpoint on their medical. And I was able to spend 3 months in Beijing working with the Chinese Olympic team's table tennis team. So these were the top table tennis athletes in the world, and just a really great experience to see the culture in Beijing and see China itself, explore that, see a different side of medicine and how Chinese medicine is being used for their athletes there, and how things overlap and how things are different and culturally different. And then shortly after that, I decided to go back and do my PhD. And that's kind of what led me up to this point of, I was doing my PhD when I got the opportunity to interview for this position. And after talking with family and friends, I couldn't turn this position down. It was just something that I had always yearned for. It was an opportunity that not many people get. And so I jumped back in, and I've loved every moment of it.
Yeah, no, that's such great perspective on how much of a grind athletic training can be, not to dissuade anybody from getting into the profession, but, working in baseball, being on the road, being away from family, it's obviously a grind, and you have to love the game, like you mentioned, and that's why you're back and in the game again. And I do want to touch on that. In 2021, you came back to baseball, replacing longtime athletic trainer with the Reds, Steve Bauman, who did an awesome job and was seemingly there forever in Cincinnati. When you got back in 2021, was it kind of the point where a head job with a big league club was what you were looking for, or did you have an idea of, maybe you'd come back into baseball in a different capacity, or were you just looking to get back into the game in general?
To tell you the truth, I wasn't even looking to get back into baseball. I had still had that love of the game, and the PhD that I was pursuing was at the University of South Carolina. I had connected with Chuck Thigpen and Ellen Shanley, two big names in baseball research, years ago. And so I reached out to Chuck when I was starting to look at getting into academia, becoming a professor. And my vision was to do some research with baseball, to work with both physical therapy and athletic training education programs where I could help mentor and educate the future of both professions. But also I had the idea of working with the university baseball team of wherever I was working and provide whatever help I could to develop their athletes and their players and get them to the next level of being professional players. And so while I was on that path, I got the invitation to interview for this position. And I initially said no, because I was on this track. This was still in the world of baseball, helping out that, but I wasn't really looking to get into baseball. And as I talked it over with my family, my girlfriend, and my friends, it really became apparent that I still had that desire to do this. And I think it filled in a lot of the things I was looking to achieve of being faculty at a university and teaching in one of those programs. It was about mentoring the next level. And I see that as an opportunity here in this head athletic trainer role, that, I have 2 assistants that are with me full time. We've created a rotating athletic training position here in the major leagues, where we're planning every year to bring up a minor league trainer to work with us for the year and then rotate them back down to the minor leagues so that they get opportunities to see what it's like to be in the major leagues, get that experience under their belt, and hopefully develop them into better trainers for our minor league. But then hiring new athletic trainers in, new physical therapists, hopefully providing them some of the wisdom and knowledge I've developed over these years and help further their career. All of those things were very similar to what I was hoping to do with my PhD working at a university level. like I said, I jumped back in, and it's just been a great job now to really start getting my hands dirty and digging into what direction do we want to bring our organization as far as the medical departments, and how do we want to train and educate our athletic trainers, our physical therapists. How do we work together as a group so we're achieving a common goal? Mm-hmm. And then on the side of that, helping our major league team stay healthy so that we can win. That is the ultimate goal of why we're here and what we're doing, right? So,
one thing
that's kind of how that's gone.
Yeah, that's a great story, and really cool to hear you have such a selfless attitude and really want to help the next generation of athletic trainers, which is really cool. And that's one thing I wanted to discuss here now is getting your perspective on team building, like you mentioned, as an athletic training staff. So the Reds had been together for a very long time under Steve Bauman, Tomas Vera, who's an assistant of yours now. We had Tomas on the show a couple months ago, and he always has such great insight about the Reds and how you guys operate. But when you were coming in as a first-year head athletic trainer and trying to find your place in the clubhouse alongside Tomas and the other people on your staff, what was kind of your vision for how you were going to come in and, maybe not be too overbearing, but still, set the tone for how you like to operate and build a team there?
That's a really good question, because that first year was difficult. 2001, December 2001, the lockout began. So I think I was hired right around the beginning of December, and the lockout happened the next day. So I couldn't even start reaching out to players. Luckily, I was able to start reaching out to my staff and the people that I would be working with. And even though we couldn't talk with players, we could start creating our relationship and developing our relationship. And I even felt like that first year, I did a lot more observing and a lot less of mandating or dictating how we're going to go and what we're going to do. So I could really get a sense of what was going on, what was happening, where did I see areas that we could really start digging into and improving. And I felt like that's what's happened over these last 2 years, is now it's starting to implement what are the things that we need to really impact and get better at. But also now seeing that really that I'm the head athletic trainer, and even though Tomas has been here for many, many years, and he has plenty of respect from all the players because of his experience and his knowledge and his skills, I need to step up and be that person as well. Not as a slight to Tomas, but, to really take ownership of, this is my training room. These are my athletes, and I want them to be as healthy as possible. And so it took me this is the third year, and now I'd say I'm starting to feel a lot more comfortable to be able to go to players and just say, hey, what's going on? How can we help you? What can we do to make you play better, feel better, recover better, and not have a fear of they don't respect what I'm going to say, or saying the wrong thing, or alienating somebody. I feel like those are things that Tomas has been able to do very well, of making those connections and those relationships just from his years of experience of doing this. And Tomas has years of experience doing this. So he's been, just a great, right-hand man. And to his credit, from day one, he came to me and he said, hey, I know you're new here, but this is what you can count on me for. I got your back. I'm going to be right there with you. I'm going to tell you the truth. You may not like it, but I got your back. And to have that was huge, because he is just such a big presence and a big wealth of knowledge and tons of wisdom. And, to tell you the truth, we had so many great conversations those first 2 years about what about this and what about that and how do we do this? And, I was able to bring my ideas to him and say, hey, these are the areas that I think we need to impact. And he would be able to kick it around with me. We didn't always agree on the direction that it was going to go, but we could talk it out. And once we came to a consensus, then we moved on together. And that's just been huge to, I'd say, allow me to progress over these next couple of years.
Yeah, I think anyone that knows Tomas Vera is, like you said, his presence is unavoidable in a good way. He's such a charismatic, outgoing guy who really, when you're speaking with him, he's so present, so encouraging, and really makes you feel like he cares. And I couldn't imagine how amazing it was to have someone like him, saying they have your back, because he really is just a big presence and a guy who really cares about everybody he's with. So it's awesome to hear that. But no surprise to those that know Tomas. Well, Sean, one thing, shifting gears a bit, I want to touch on is your experience as a physical therapist. So a wealth of knowledge there. You know how much athletic training staffs have grown over the past decade. If you look back at, some staffs with a head athletic trainer and an assistant just a couple of years ago, now there might be some staffs with upwards of 8-10 athletic trainers at the big league level. Being dual credentialed as an AT and PT is very important nowadays. A lot of people are going that direction. Can you talk about the benefit of the dual credential, being proficient as both an athletic trainer and a physical therapist?
Definitely. I think, like I was saying, at my time, when I went through PT school and got my athletic training certification, it was much easier. And I think my personal opinion is that we're going to start seeing less and less dual credential due to athletic training moving to a master's as a entry-level degree. And from what I've been told so far, it's going to extend the education process for a lot of people that want to become dual, where they'll have to get their master's of athletic training and then get another 2 to 3 years to get their doctorate of physical therapy. And it's, I think the jury's still out, but there's a lot of belief that students aren't going to want to put themselves through that amount of schooling for the potential financial benefits of doing it. For me personally, to have both sides of that knowledge, I think was the way to go. It just made so much sense to me to be able to become proficient of seeing an injury happen on the field as an athletic trainer, being able to manage it there, and then bring them back into the training room and actually rehab them to get them back onto the field. It seemed like a no-brainer to do that. So I still encourage anybody that's interested in getting into professional baseball, getting into the sports world. This is probably the best way to go. And if you can figure out a way to do it or find programs that are doing it to become dual certified at the same time, that's where I would push people to go to do it. That was my intention of finding those programs and teaching at those programs. So when I was on that academia path and looking to do my PhD, because it continues to make so much sense to me that they are so similar. There's so much overlap. I even prior to athletic training becoming a master's, I would tell anybody interested in becoming a PT is to get your bachelor's in athletic training, because that's going to set you up to succeed in the PT programs, because you'll have all of this knowledge and foundation going into PT school that a lot of PT students don't have if they haven't been in those arenas. For me, I think it's been huge for my career. I think it gives me a leg up on a number of other professionals that are trying to do the same things I'm doing, because I have knowledge in both worlds. I have experience in both worlds. And I feel like I was lucky to go through school at the time that I did, where I was able to do all of that pretty seamlessly and not really extend my academia career.
Yeah. And to piggyback off your answer there, I think a lot of our listeners take advice from the show and people like you, because, you're so established in the game, and would probably love to hear, more on a basic level. You mentioned there's just so much overlap between physical therapist job and athletic trainer's job. But talk to us a bit about the differences. What makes, someone a physical therapist on the Red staff versus someone who is just an athletic trainer? Ton of overlap, as you mentioned, but I'd love to hear kind of from your perspective as someone who knows both very well, the major differences in how those, duties and responsibilities are different throughout the entire season.
So I think in the worlds of it, the areas that they overlap is the orthopedic evaluation and treatment. There's a lot of similarities in diagnosing developing plans of rehab, because there are a lot of athletic trainers that do rehab injuries in their training room. And how we've designed our major league medical system is that any of our players that have an injury that we perceive will take longer than 6 weeks to heal or recover or get back to playing, we'll try to send them out to Arizona, where our director of physical therapy and rehab is. And they have all of the opportunities available to them. They can set up any kind of drills. They can get all of their treatments done. They can get their strength and conditioning done. They can do all their throwing programs without having to work around a baseball game, which is kind of makes it hard, in my opinion, to try to get all of that done at the same time, where you have somebody that's rehabbing and not going to play in the game that day, getting all their work done at the same time as players that are trying to get ready for the game. And it just creates a lot of a logjam. So we've made those separations so that we have rehabbers doing rehab during rehab time, and so they can get everything done at that time. And then our healthy guys will come in after that to start preparing for the game, and then they don't have anything in their way to get everything done that they need to do. So as we function now, I would say our athletic training staff is really focused on preparing guys to play in the game, managing any kind of nagging injuries or soreness or fatigue, and then obviously watching the games and being vigilant to see if there's anything that goes on in the game that you may need to manage or treat after the game. And our physical therapist will be handling anybody that's not going to be in a game. And I think that structure has really worked well for us. It allows each area to be focused on what they're doing, whereas when we had everything running together, it just created a lot of traffic in the training room. I think it led to players not wanting to come in there at certain times because they knew that there would be all sorts of other people there. And this setup allows everybody to do their best job possible, because there's not that crossover. There's not that interference. We don't have to work around each other. Everybody's able to focus on their areas of expertise and really excel in those areas.
Yeah, that's a great way to explain it. I think super helpful for our listeners out there who are kind of wondering or learning about both physical therapy and athletic training in school right now. And speaking of your staff and kind of how you operate there in Cincinnati, you have so many great people on staff. We've mentioned Tomas Vera already, but at this time, I do want to give you some time to recognize some of the other people who make up the Reds athletic training and sports medicine staff and kind of help you make your job easier every day.
Oh, definitely. So we've mentioned Tomas. My other full-time assistant is Ryan Ross. And then this year, that rotating position is Wade Hebrink. He's been doing a great job fitting in well with kind of our mini culture and our group. We also have a manual specialist from Japan, Takeshi Yamamoto. He was actually a personal manual therapist for Shogo Akiyama when he was playing with the Reds. And when Shogo left, everybody loved the work that Takeshi did. We were able to keep him on staff, and so he's with us for the season, and he'll go back home to Japan every year. But he's a huge component because it's just very interesting. The way that he was trained, his experiences, his knowledge base is different than how we're trained here in the United States. And it provides another layer of treatment and thought process. And it's just a really good addition to our staff. Everybody loves him. He's just a great person to have in the training room. He works his tail off day in and day out. There's days that he comes and looks at me and he says, I didn't work hard enough today. And he's probably done 15 massages that day. But that's just what he brings to the table. He's just a great clinician and a good person to have around. We also have a Pilates instructor, Robin Cohen. She's been with us for a number of years. And we work well where we can go to her and say, hey, we got this guy, we got this going on with him. What do you think that you'd be able to contribute? As well as vice versa, where guys will go directly to her, they'll work with her, and she's able to come to us and say, hey, I was working with so-and-so. They got this, this, and this going on. And I think it helps us to develop a better plan of care for that guy to make sure that he's staying healthy and staying out on the field. We also have at home, we have a massage therapist, Micah Ritchie. We have two chiropractors, Mike Rolfs and Nick Rolfs. Mike Rolfs has been with the team for probably 30 years, I believe. And Nick, I believe, is probably close to 8 to 10 years now. So same working relationship like we have with Robin, where guys can go to them and see them directly, or we can refer guys to them when we're working with them. Let's see. I don't think, I can't skip over our orthopedic physicians. They're phenomenal. Dr. Krenchek has been around forever, Dr. Rosano, and then our internal med docs, Dr. Cleaves, Dr. Thaler, Dr. Mena. All these guys provide huge, huge benefit to our team. They've been around for a long time. They understand how things work. And so they've been phenomenal to be around and to just lean on in the orthopedic and the internal med world. Mm-hmm. We have a good working relationship with our strength and conditioning team, Rob Fumagalli and Aaron Rice and Dan Adams. And then something that I've always thought would be great to bring into professional baseball when I was in baseball the first time was a team nutritionist. And Ashley, she's been great to work with because we can have this dialogue back and forth of, hey, we got this going on. What can you provide? How can you do this? And she handles everything for food, anything on the road, all of our catering at the stadium. She provides supplements. She provides all sorts of anything around nutrition is definitely her wheelhouse. And then kind of the next level up, we have a whole sports science department that has really been great to work with, because I think for me, it's provided a outlet for the academia world that I was pursuing. All of these guys are already PhDs. They're well steeped into baseball research and biomechanical movements. And I think we've had a number of really good conversations about how do we improve our processes? What are the areas that we need to focus on? How can we work together? And that's Aaron Kunanen and Frankie Malloy. Both of those guys have been great to work with to help develop all of that. And really, one of my big areas of focus going forward now, or one of the bigger projects that I want to start building onto, is how do we assess our players coming in as a group, bringing everybody that I just mentioned together and saying, when we have a player come in, we all know who that person is, how do they move, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and program a plan together so that we're hitting all the angles to give this guy the best opportunity to get out on the field and perform. Mm-hmm. So that's expanded significantly from my first time in baseball, where you might have 2 athletic trainers, a strength coach, and that's pretty much it. And it's mm-hmm. just grown and grown and grown. And I think for the better. Sometimes you can just have too much, but I feel like what we have going is really helping out the players and providing them opportunities, providing them different types of care that they may not know that they need. But I do think it benefits the players overall.
Yeah. And we appreciate you sharing all that info about your staff. And clearly, as you mentioned there, and we talked about earlier, it does take so many talented individuals to make things go each and every day in the clubhouse and the training room, and also ultimately just to keep those players healthy and on the field, which is the ultimate goal in leading towards winning there. Well, Sean, to wrap up today's episode, we're going to finish with a quick Q&A segment called Extra Bases. I'm excited to ask you 4 quick questions, let you share some insight about your time in baseball and athletic training. So we will kick it off at first base. Outside of being home in Cincinnati, do you have a favorite athletic training room to work in the big leagues?
I'd have to say Seattle here. This is my first time working here in Seattle. We're here now for 3 games, and the training room is just very spacious, which is a luxury when you're on the road. There's a lot of places that aren't this large, but we have a lot of space and a lot of room, and we travel with a lot of stuff, so we need places for it all to go. And I think this training room has a good space, and then there's actually a door that leads right into the strength and conditioning weight room. So it's easy access to go back and forth and to be able to collaborate.
Yeah, it's a good answer. I think a lot of our guests have echoed that statement in terms of having space and proximity to weight room or clubhouse are very important. So, definitely a similar answer for you there. Moving on to second base. You obviously get to watch games from the dugout, seemingly every day, a really cool vantage point for a baseball fan. What's your favorite big league stadium to sit in the dugout and watch a game?
I really, really enjoyed being in Boston. There was just something about like the lights and the surroundings, and it had this old timey feel, and just being the baseball nerd that I was growing up, just all the stories and the history. And I mean, it's like every turn and corner there at that stadium is just a little bit, another piece of history, but it was just great to be there and to, just soak it all in. That was definitely my favorite place to watch a game so far.
Yeah, I totally agree. As a baseball fan myself, Wrigley Field and Fenway Park are, pretty much unbeatable if you're a, fan of baseball history. Well, moving on to third base. Again, this, travel related question here. Outside of the actual games and what you do for work, do you have a favorite city to visit when you guys are on the road?
I mean, Chicago's great. You can't beat Chicago. I think we stay in a great place. It's very centralized, so it's easy for us to get around. Tomas and I love to ride the subways and the trains to get to any stadium. So New York is great too. Sadly, the hard part about our job is there are plenty of times where it doesn't matter what city we're in, because we're just at the hotel and then go to the stadium and that's it. Yeah. And you miss out on all the wonderful things to experience. But I think even Seattle here is great. Today, I think we're going to go down to the Pike Place Market and wander around a little bit before we have to go to the stadium. So those are a good couple there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Chicago and Seattle are tough to beat. You get you're a bunch of water to look at, and obviously in Seattle to have the mountains and the ocean is very, very unique there. Well, moving on to home plate, the last question for today. You've been with the Reds for a couple of years now in the big leagues as the head athletic trainer. When you broke in with the Reds, did you have a welcome to the big leagues moment at any point?
The 2 that come to mind were opening day for us was in Atlanta, and during the national anthem, it was just very emotional for me to realize that I had made it there. I got there. I was living my dream of being with a major league team, and that was just a great experience. And then the second one was that year we also played in the Field of Dreams game in Iowa. It was literally out in the cornfield in Iowa. There was nothing around, and we had a player that had a concerning injury such that they had to airlift him to the closest hospital, which was in Iowa City, a good hour and a half drive. Probably a 20-minute flight for him, but an hour and a half drive for myself. And that was probably at 10 o'clock at night, drove through the night to go see him at the hospital there. He got discharged around 3 a.m. and we got probably 5 or 6 hours of sleep at a hotel, and then got up and realized that it would have been much longer to catch a flight back to Cincinnati than to drive. So we hopped in a minivan and we did a 9-hour drive back to Cincinnati. And I'd say that was probably the baptism of welcome to Major League Baseball as a head athletic trainer.
Yeah, definitely. So much that goes into your job, and being in the big league. So it's always interesting to hear those stories from people in your position. Well, Sean, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate you and your time, your dedication to athletic training and PBATs as well. And we wish you, Tomas, and the rest of the staff there in Cincinnati nothing but the best of luck throughout this season.
Thank you so much, Sam. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Inside Athletic Training. We hope you've gained valuable insights, inspiration, and knowledge to fuel your athletic training journey. If you enjoyed today's show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite platform. And also, stay connected with us on pbats.com for more news about athletic training and sports medicine.